The black car pulled up almost silently at the gates of the mansion. No one was expecting it. The house stood as empty as it had been for the past 18 months. But as soon as Alexei Sokolov opened the heavy door, the silence cracked. A sound echoed from somewhere inside, soft, alive. A chill ran through his chest. He stood frozen in the hallway, listening. After the accident, this house had become a museum. Marble, glass, the steady glow of sconces, and a resonant emptiness. Nothing had sounded here for a long time except the footsteps of the staff and the hum of machinery. Today, he had returned unannounced, interrupting a meeting, not quite understanding why. And suddenly, from the depths of the house, came a short, ringing laugh, a child's. Children's laughter vanished from here the day his wife died. Marina was driving the girls home when their car was crushed by a truck on a wet road. Alexei, meanwhile, was sitting in his London office, signing another contract. A phone call, the words accident and no survivor, and the world he'd spent years building collapsed in a minute. He was silent at the funeral, but only his heart cried out. Their triplets, Liza, Sonia, and Katya, 4 years old, with identical blonde braids, simply vanished with their voices. They didn't cry, didn't ask questions, didn't call for their mother. They held hands and stared through the crowd like little ghosts. The doctor spoke of shock and time. Time passed. The girls were silent. Alexei did what he did best. He began to solve the problem with money. Psychiatrists, therapists, speech therapists, development centers, the sea, the mountains, the best private kindergarten. He built a perfect playground in the yard, bought a pony, and set up a mini kids club at home. The girls played on the swings, walked on the sand, holding hands, but didn't utter a word. It was as if they had made a pact with the pain, silence or nothing. Then he retreated into work completely. His schedule became a continuous stream of cities and flights: Moscow, Dubai, Singapore. The mansion became a place where he only changed clothes between flights. 12 bedrooms, a swimming pool, a cinema, and silence, heavy as concrete. Only the housekeeper, Nadezhda Petrovna, didn't give up. She'd worked with the family for almost 20 years and remembered the girls as infants. One evening, she came into his office. "Alexei Sergeyevich," she said quietly but firmly, "I can't cope alone." He looked up from his laptop for a few seconds. "Find someone reliable." A week later, a new girl appeared in the house, Dina. She wore a simple gray uniform and had a warm, slightly tired smile. During the day, she helped around the house and with the children. In the evening, she studied to be a speech therapist. Her younger brother was waiting for her at home. She knew what it was like to live with emptiness inside, yet she still got up and cooked porridge. Alexei didn't care. He saw her one day in the hallway with a laundry basket and immediately forgot about her. The girls didn't forget. Dina didn't drag them to specialists, didn't ask questions, and didn't demand smiles. She simply came into their room every day, folded little t-shirts, arranged toys, and quietly sang old songs. First, Lisa would appear in the doorway for a second. Then Sonia would linger nearby. Katya was the last to peek out, clutching a tattered bunny tightly to her chest. While Alexei slept in hotels, something living was being born in the house, millimeter by millimeter. A crooked sunburst would appear on a neat pile of linens. Katya would sit timidly on the floor next to him. Sonia would whisper her first word to Dina in months. But he didn't know about it. For him, the mansion remained dead. And today, when a broken deal and nauseating fatigue drove him here instead of to the office, he heard it for the first time in a long time. Not an echo, not a television. A child's laughter. Real, subtle, ringing. The sound came from the kitchen. Alexei's fingers tightened on the cold doorknob. His heart was beating so loudly it drowned out everything else. He stepped forward and slowly pushed the door open, not imagining what he'd see on the other side. He pushed the door open and the world before him changed. Sunlight flooded the kitchen, making the white tiles almost blinding. Mugs of cocoa sat on the table. Dina sat on a chair with her back turned, and Katya, disheveled and wearing a bright yellow dress, sat on her lap. Liza and Sonia stood barefoot on stools by the sink, laughing as they tried to catch the stream of water with their soapy palms. The girls were singing, not just humming, they were singing a familiar song about the sun from childhood, stumbling, interrupting each other, bursting into laughter. Voices he thought lost forever filled the kitchen so thickly it made him want to cry. Dina gently picked up the melody, holding Katya with one hand and turning little circles of dough onto a towel with the other. Alexei froze in the doorway, unable to take a step. His briefcase slipped from his fingers and fell with a thud to the floor. The girls didn't notice. In their world right now, there was only Dina, the splashing water, and the song. Katya, her head thrown back, looked up at her the way she once looked at Marina, with complete, unconditional faith that there was someone nearby who would never disappear. For 3 seconds, Alexei's chest exploded. A warm wave of relief washed over him so unexpectedly that it took his breath away. They were alive, not just physically, alive in spirit, laughing, singing, arguing, fooling around. It was as if God, whom he had long ago erased from his life, had returned to him the most precious thing he had never dared ask for. And then something inside him twisted. Joy flared and then immediately charred into a strange, sticky feeling. Alongside the relief, shame and anger rose, not at the girls, but at himself and at her. While he was flying around the world signing deals, this unknown woman had done what he couldn't. She had pulled his children out of the darkness where he'd left them on the day of their funeral. And it had been unbearable. His voice burst from his lips so loudly that he himself flinched. The song cut off, as if someone had turned off the sound. Lisa clutched the edge of the stool convulsively. Sonia froze, clutching a wet towel. Katya sluggishly slid off Dina's lap and hid behind her shoulder. Dina rose slowly, carefully placing the girl on the floor. Her fingers trembled, but her gaze was steady. He nearly shouted, feeling the heat rise to his face. Who gave you the right to sit my children on tables, carry them around, and create a circus in the kitchen? What if one of them fell? I never left them unattended for a second, Dina whispered. I don't need your concern, he snapped. Pack your things and leave. For a second, pain flickered in Dina's eyes, but he heard neither excuses nor pleas. She merely nodded. The girls turned to look at him, and for the first time, he saw something other than emptiness in their gazes. Fear. Pure, childish fear of the man who had just destroyed their small island of warmth. Dina walked out of the kitchen, her back straight, without looking back. The girls followed slowly down the stairs, holding hands so tightly as if the world had begun to crumble beneath their feet again. No tears, no words, only silence, returning to the house like an old, terrifying master. Alexei was left alone among scattered towels, half-baked pancakes, and cold cocoa, which just a moment ago had been the center of their little happiness. The sunlight, so warm a second ago, became harsh and merciless. It cut into his eyes and seemed to show everything too clearly. But the house no longer responded. Silence once again filled every crack, every room, every thought. He couldn't sleep that night. He sat in his office with an untouched glass of whiskey, staring at Marina's photograph, the one where she's laughing, clutching her 3 little girls. Marina, he whispered into the darkness, but the darkness didn't argue. Towards morning, Nadezhda Petrovna came to see him. Without a tray, without the usual words of comfort, she simply stood in front of him and said, "They've been talking, Alexei Sergeyevich, for over a month now. They sang, joked, told stories." The glass trembled in his hand. "Marina," he breathed. "Because you were never there to tell me," she replied quietly, and left, leaving him alone with the truth. That morning, he tried to get Dina back. Apologies, words, money, everything he used to cover up any rifts. But the phone was silent. The next day he went to see her himself, to an old house on the outskirts of town, where his expensive car looked out of place among the peeling entryways. A teenager with an intense gaze opened the door. "What do you?" he asked rudely. Alexei nodded. The door slammed in his face. He stood on the landing, staring at the chipped paint, and for the first time realized that money meant nothing here. Neither influence, nor name, nor billions could open this door. And this feeling of helplessness squeezed his chest more than all the years of loss. That same evening, he heard the girls outside their room. They were whispering to each other again, but not calling him. They were asking if Dina would come back. They were crying quietly, so he wouldn't hear. And every word struck him harder than any scream. He spent the night on the hallway floor, his forehead pressed against the cold wall, listening to their voices fade and then rise to a whisper behind the nursery door. They spoke of Dina the way they used to speak of their mother, carefully, as if any word could take her away again. And in those whispers, he understood clearly for the first time, he was no longer a support for them now. He was fear. Towards morning, Alexei rose, numb in his legs, and set off again. To the same house, to the same door. But this time, he didn't knock like a master, nor demand like an employer. He stood and waited until someone opened the door. The door opened slightly, and the teenager's wary eyes looked at him again. 5 minutes, Alexei said quietly. This time, the door swung open wider. The small room smelled of coffee and something warm and homey. Dina stood by the window, her back to it. Hearing footsteps, she slowly turned around. There was no anger in her gaze, only weariness. "I realized it all too late," he said immediately, as if afraid that if he remained silent, he would lose his temper again. "I destroyed not only your world, I destroyed my children." They fell silent again, not because you left. She remained silent. "I have nothing to offer you but the truth," he breathed out. "I don't know how to be a father. I thought that if I provided for them, protected them with money, hired the best, that would be enough. But I simply disappeared from their lives, and now they don't believe me." He slowly sank into the chair, as if his legs could no longer support him. "I'm not asking you to come back as an employee. I'm asking you as a person. Help me learn to be there." Dina looked at him for a long time, her eyes warred with pain, doubt, and the very kindness that had drawn the girls to her. "You hurt them so much," she said quietly. "I know," Alexei whispered, "and I'll pay for this for the rest of my life." Dina turned to the window. Outside, the courtyard bustled, and someone's life went on, unaware that the fate of 3 little hearts was being decided here. "If I come back," she said finally, without turning around, "you won't be able to run away anymore. Not to work, not to money, not to silence. You'll have to stay, every day, even when it's shameful." "I'll stay," he answered without hesitation. She turned. Their gazes met, and there was no forgiveness in that gaze. This was the final test. "I'll give you 2 days," Dina said. "During that time, you'll tell them yourself that you came for me, that you fought. And if in 2 days they're still waiting—" Alexei nodded. When he stepped outside, the air felt heavier than ever. But inside, for the first time in a long time, there was no emptiness. A tense, terrifying, trembling hope. At the gate, the car stopped slowly, as if it too was afraid to disturb the fragile silence around the house. Alexei took a step back, letting the girls go forward, as if towards the light after a long night. Dina got out of the car and stopped, seeing the 3 of them at the window of the old house. Liza took the first step, then Sonia, then little Katya with a clenched fist in her chest. They did not run, they walked carefully, as if on the thin ice of their distrustful hearts. Dina knelt down right on the path, not hiding her tears from the newly gifted one. Katya was the first to crash into her arms, then Sonia, then Lisa, all trembling at once. They spoke at the same time, slurring their words, crying and laughing as if they had returned home after a long journey. Alexei stood behind their backs and did not dare approach immediately, fearing to destroy the miracle. Dina looked up at him through her tears and nodded slightly in agreement. He approached slowly, as if he was learning to walk through his own life again without his usual armor. 3 small hands reached out to him uncertainly, but at the same time as to the only shore. He knelt down next to them and hugged them all at once, for the first time not hiding behind fear. At that moment, the house seemed to exhale, releasing months of silent pain from its walls. The girls whispered, laughed, asked questions, forgetting about the cautious silence that kept them like that. Alexei listened to every word, as if he was learning to breathe again through them after a long period of suffocation. He realized that wealth does not bring back voices or heal the silence of broken hearts. It only buys time, which without love turns into emptiness, like a cold room. Dina looked at them all and quietly smiled a tired, happy smile after the battle. Alexei took her hand and for the first time was not like a master, but like a father nearby. There were many difficult days ahead, setbacks, tears and doubts that no longer frightened me. Because now in this house voices were heard again and hope remained forever inside.